Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where we turn our attention next to, well, the other big C in British politics. Jeremy Corbyn. David Cameron is just sort of perusing his sandwiches wrapped in a roadmap, preparing for his final PMQs. His legacy is a little sketchy, I think we can agree, after the last hour of trying to pin it down. What Jeremy Corbyn's legacy will be, if he ever does shuffle off into the political wilderness, God only knows. But we'll try once again to unravel this mystery at the very heart of British politics at the moment. Some people see something wonderful, most people don't. Why? Thinking about this since yesterday's programme, and it's important not to allow another wedge to be driven into British politics, another sort of unfathomable gulf to grow within a single party. This one, you compare the Conservatives to Labour at the moment, and it's about efficiency. That's the big difference. And I think for the purposes of this hour, because it led us into such choppy waters yesterday, I'm going to park the observation, the comeback that I have to all people calling in to tell me that Jeremy Corbyn is wonderful. I'm going to park the observation that you can't change anything without power. You can't make meaningful change to a country's distribution of wealth or provision of social justice unless you're actually in power. I think that's just a given. And I'm going to park my deep misgivings about politicians who seem to think that achieving power doesn't matter as long as you've got a really nice and lovely set of principles. Then it doesn't matter whether you ever actually get the chance to enact them or not. Somehow democracy is enhanced by the existence of the principles, the promotion of the principles. I think I can just about get that. But parliamentary democracy depends upon, well, political parties being led in the parliament. And the man is not leading his party in Parliament. So we need to park that as well. What I'm trying to do is just remove all the wood or remove all the trees so that I can see the wood, if you pardon the sort of clumsy expression. I don't want to have another fight with people who think he's wonderful but don't really know why. Okay, it makes for great listening a couple of times. You've got another viral clip on the old social media, but actually it's just dispiriting for everybody involved. Someone who thinks Jeremy Corbyn is wonderful but can't really explain why. So I'll explain why he's wonderful, and we'll take it from there today. We'll do it the other way round. There is a sense in the world, but in this country in particular, that things are being done in a way that is absolutely rank. And by that I mean that there is a sense, there is a perception that a relatively small number of people wield excessive power and trouser excessive rewards. There is a sense that Rupert Murdoch essentially makes all the major political decisions of our time. You would add Paul Dacre to that list, possibly, the leader of the Daily Mail, the editor of the Daily Mail, and you would struggle to think of a time when the national electorate didn't do what the Daily Mail and the Sun told them to do. And a lot of people are very frightened by that. What they've struggled to do historically is explain their fears in a way that doesn't sound like they're insulting those who did do what the Sun and the Daily Mail told them to do, but don't believe they did it because the Sun and the Daily Mail told them to do it. They believe they did it because they've looked at the facts and they've looked at the fictions, and they've made a choice. They've made a clear choice. And look, most people who vote in a way that you don't like have actually employed precisely the same faculties that you've employed when arriving at the opposite decision. It's patronising, sneering and wrong to say, oh, well, they're all stupid, or they're all brainwashed, or they're all spoon-fed. But when you see these little sort of 4-line apologies filed away in the basement of the newspaper, and they're apologising for massive front-page stories encouraging you to believe things, and they're apologising for those stories being completely untrue, you can, I think, at least begin to see where this constituency comes from. They believe that the country is not only being run for the benefit of a relatively small number of extremely wealthy people, they also believe that the country wouldn't be run like that if the population was getting better advice, if it was getting better journalism, if it was actually getting better service from the people historically charged with holding politicians and power to account. I don't know when that was that the media routinely spoke truth to power. It certainly wasn't in my lifetime. And every time I think it might have happened just before I was born, I think of that Malcolm X quote about if you're not careful, the newspapers will have you hating the people who are being oppressed and loving the people who are oppressing you. So it's clearly not unique to Britain or indeed unique to our era. But if you want to make a list, I've tried to do this because I didn't enjoy yesterday's programme, even though so many of you told me that you did. I derived no pleasure at all from taking an idea list and essentially debagging them, showing them that they've got absolutely nothing in their cupboard. So I've tried to go beyond the policy and look at where the almost emotional politics lies here. And top of the list is the perception that Britain is run not only for the benefit of, but also pretty much by a tiny cabal of extremely wealthy and powerful people. And that is why when a country is charged with saving money, they bring in things like the bedroom tax and benefit cuts and tax credit cuts and NHS cuts and education cuts. And I think that your Corbynite, and I hope that word's not offensive, I want to find a Corbyn admirer, Corbynite, you think, don't you, that he is... he's not even necessarily able to deliver it, but he articulates the view that the money should have come from somewhere else. And do you know what? I agree with that. I agree with that. I always have. In fact, I spoke a little else in the run-up to the last general election in 2010. The idea that we have been successfully persuaded as a country that the money we need to shore up the mess made by bankers should come from nurses, and their wages frozen for 6 years, teachers, if they're lucky enough to still have a job, people on benefits, most of whom, of course, we discovered in the course of those conversations, were still in work. The idea that money needed to fix a financial crisis should come from those with the least is obnoxious to an almost unbelievable degree, except it was rendered believable by that combination of media and politics. That is, for me, and you're going to correct me if I'm wrong, this is me trying to get my head around it, okay? That is where Corbynism begins, isn't it? It begins with the view that you should not be taking money from people with the least to plug holes created by people with the most. Who the hell can argue with that? Well, answer everyone who voted Conservative in 2010, I guess, let alone 2015. But that's a really beautiful principle. That's not a reason to throw bricks through windows or to issue death threats on social media or to start screaming at each other at constituency party meetings. The money should have been coming from the top of society, not the bottom. And yes, you will get the rhetoric of politics of envy, and you'll get poor people being encouraged by rich journalists to side with the rich journalists against their fellow poor people. You'll get all of that. But that's the central premise, right? The money should have been coming from the top, whether you're talking about tax avoiding companies or whether you're simply talking about a higher rate of income tax for the country's highest earners, or whether you're clamping down on little sort of offshore trusts and legal but deeply questionable measures by which rich people pay a smaller proportion of their wealth into the treasury than poor people do. So that's where it begins, and I get that. Whether he represents that truly, or whether he's just been banging this tired old drum for 40 years is not the conversation that we're having today. So, rich and poor. Corbyn is on the side of the poor. And of course, a large majority of his voters, supporters, fans will not be poor. They're not voting out of self-interest. They're voting out of the opposite of self-interest. They're voting selflessly. They're voting, and this winds up right-wingers more than anything else. They've even invented a whole bunch of new names to describe it. When people actually think that politics should be employed to help those less fortunate than themselves. We call ourselves a Christian country. That's the single most powerful tenet of Christianity, is that you should help those less fortunate than yourselves. But when a politician or a pundit or a journalist stands up and says it, that's champagne socialism or virtue signalling or the politics of envy. Corbyn represents people who think politics should help those less fortunate than themselves. Corbyn represents people who think that the rich should be shouldering more of the burden of financial crisis than the poor. And these are beautiful things. These are wonderful policies. I'm trying really hard. I am. And it's working. I'm seeing it in a way that I couldn't see it yesterday. But then, and I know I said I was going to park the observation that you can't change anything without achieving power. And I'm going to try my best. Because then you move on to reality as opposed to ideal. It's not a word, is it? Ideality. What, idealism? I just wanted something that would sit more neatly alongside reality. So you move then into reality. And the reality is that he was elected the leader of a political party that is perceived by many of its traditional supporters not to have spoken up for the poor, not to have spoken up for the vulnerable, not to have done enough to resist David Cameron's programme of cuts and austerity. So that makes sense as well. I understand why he got elected. And then we have the last 9 months of British history, which have been remarkable for a whole heap of reasons. And we have this astonishing situation in which I think, and I hesitate to say this out loud because my predictions are so strong, I'm 2 for 2 at the moment on Leadsom and Boris. So if I go for the hat-trick and get it wrong, it's going to be a real embarrassment. But I think the Labour Party is finished in its current form. I don't see how, unless Corbyn is defeated in the leadership ballot and his core support have to somehow splinter off into a new tendency or faction, I don't think that's going to happen. I think he's going to win. And the Parliamentary Labour Party is at odds with the membership and the leader. Over 80% of the Parliamentary Labour Party have no confidence in Jeremy Corbyn. Now, what I think you get wrong as a big fan is thinking that that means they're not on the side of the poor, or that means that they're not embarrassed by their failure to properly reject austerity, or that means this, or that means that. They've got no confidence in Jeremy Corbyn as a leader, not even as a thinker or a politician or a protester. They've just got no confidence in him as a leader. That's what these votes mean. It's a vote of no confidence in their leadership. And by leadership, they fundamentally mean ability to win an election. Do you have any confidence in this man's ability to win you a general election? No, I don't. And guess what? A lot of his biggest fans agree. That's the weirdest thing about where we are now with Labour. A lot of his biggest fans agree. No, of course he doesn't want to be leader of the whole country. Of course he doesn't want to be. It's not about that. It's about representing these views more on the political stage. That's the first big disconnect. These people don't realise, in a sense, that they agree with each other. So, when he wins, if he wins, whether it's Owen Smith or Angela Eagle who ends up on the ballot against him, and the hundreds of thousands of people who've joined the party relatively recently cheer and celebrate, and the 200-odd MPs who got elected at the last election to represent their constituents on a Labour manifesto put their head in their hands and don't know where to turn, then there's a split, right? There's two parties that come out of that. One will look a little bit like the SDP, perhaps, and one will look a little bit like Labour did under Michael Foot. I don't think I've said anything controversial yet, have I? We're all agreeing so far. This is all accurate, and some people will be going, yes, because what we really need is a Labour Party like the one that we had under Michael Foot, even though it was the least electable Labour Party in the whole of the 20th century. It somehow represents more than that. And that's where I want you to talk to me today. I just want you to tell me, this is a question that we moved towards yesterday, what success looks like. I don't want to fight with you today. I really don't. Don't ring me up with nonsense, okay, about some book you haven't properly read, but you're pretty sure it proves that Yanis Varoufakis and Jeremy Corbyn should be running the whole world. Just tell me what success looks like, given that his foes and friends don't agree on much, but they agree that he's probably not electable as Prime Minister. That's where I think all the frustration comes from for people like me. Like, how can you be having these conversations against a backdrop of not wanting to govern? To which the brilliant response is, because power at any cost isn't worth having. And I get that as well. See, I've been thinking about it a lot. What does success look like for you as a Jeremy Corbyn admirer? And thankfully, I haven't alienated all of you yet. 0345 6060973. I just want to know what success looks like. What would constitute victory? Because some people are going to say, well, deselecting all those Blairites. And that's fine, I'll put that on the list if that's what victory looks like. I mean, it's heartbreaking. That is destroying the Labour Party. And most of them aren't Blairites. But in terms of the country, in terms of the broader picture, the bigger issues, what does the Corbyn project seek to achieve? What is it that you're cheering the prospect of? 0345 6060 973. Because my fear is that it's not actually in favour of anything. It's just against everything. It's why yesterday I drew very reluctant and cautious parallels with UKIP. You ask people, what's the party for? We had a lot of fun with that over the years. Not laughing now. It's not for anything. It's just against stuff. And that, I think, is a criticism that you need to address with regard to Corbyn. So 2 questions. What's he actually in favour of? What's he for? But more importantly than that, what does success look like for Jeremy Corbyn's fans, admirers, supporters and voters? What will success look like? Struggle though you may to understand Jeremy Corbyn's appeal, if you break it down to things people believe in rather than things he says and does and looks like, it's a noble cause. It's a redistribution of wealth project. It's a social equality project. And many people feel that the Labour Party, as was under Ed Miliband, did not successfully represent those positions. That's not bad. That's not negative. But where does it lead? I should give you the number, shouldn't I? 0345 6060 973. Hit the numbers now. You will get through. Be quick. It'll get busy. And as someone's just tweeted, I've never heard at Mr. James O'B try so hard not to have a fight. This will not end well. Yes, it will. This is light, not heat today. Okay? Liam's in Birmingham. Liam, what would you like to say?
Hi there, James. I think my point is that Jeremy Corbyn may not be electable himself, but the agenda that he's putting forward, I think there's a growing appetite for it, not just in this country, but in Western democracies all over the world. We're seeing the Sanders appeal, Podemos in Spain, Syriza in Greece. I think that people are rejecting the neoliberal consensus, and I think Jeremy Corbyn...
This is my problem. You see, you go out on the streets of Labour heartlands where they're worried about the threat of UKIP and talk to them about the rejection of the neoliberal consensus, and what do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, I can understand. That's a fair point, but
that's part of my frustration with the project, if you like.
Hello?
No, it's all right. It's the other phone that's ringing.
Sorry, I've got a call in my office. Carry on.
You're supposed to be talking to me. Max is in Kingston. Liam, I'll let you compose yourself. Max, what's success going to look like?
I mean, it's difficult, isn't it?
Yes.
I've tone banked to Corbyn back in May last year or whenever it was. I was well into it. And I agree he's been lackluster since. But for young people, and I think, a lot of Corbynistas are young people.
Yes.
These are novel politics, They're politics that very genuinely we've never seen in our lives. And we've seen the damaging effects of neoliberalism.
We're going to have to ban the word neoliberalism, because you're supposed to be wanting to win an election, which involves voters who at the moment are being tempted towards UKIP. Talking about the demise of neoliberalism is not going to wash. It's not going to butter any parsnips with them, Max.
Well, yeah, it's difficult though, because a lot of the problems. And
by neoliberalism, you mean to really break it down to brass tacks, you mean the presumption that government should be run in a way that maximises the freedoms of big businesses, so that everybody can theoretically benefit from the trickle down of money from the top to the bottom.
Yeah. The myth of trickle down economics.
Yeah.
That fundamentally doesn't exist. It's about as relevant as social.
No, it also rests upon the premise that all money has to begin at the top in order for any of it to reach the bottom, which is pretty bogus as well. But do you really feel, as a young man, that Jeremy Corbyn is somehow the first person to represent that position publicly?
Well, he's certainly the first person in my lifetime to represent that position publicly, and from a voice of power. I've always had leftist politics. I started off as an anarchist when I was like 14 or something like that, and have gradually, progressed to where we are now, which I guess is an improvement.
No, that's a conversation for a whole different day. Although I imagine your parents are your parents are relieved. So in that case, I get that, and I think this is a big moment for me in terms of trying to get my head around this whole thing that I found so impenetrable. Then it becomes about the message, doesn't it? It becomes about the agenda rather than the individual, rather than the man. And I think most of detractors are focusing on the man and the supporters are focusing on the message. Does that sound viable?
That's certainly the case for me. I would certainly much prefer Jeremy to maybe pass the reins on to someone who could carry his message a little more powerfully.
Well, so someone who could sprinkle a little bit of stardust around the television studio, to put it simply, with the same message.
Yeah, maybe. That's what I'm after. I don't know where I'm going to vote in the leadership election. It's a bit of a mess. I don't want to vote for Angela Eagle. That's
Why not?
bleak. Her voting track record.
See, she gets very frustrated about this because I'm sure. You might well be referring to some of these. They're called memes, aren't they? That go around on Twitter listing the fact that she voted for the Iraq War. But this is, in a way, this speaks to me of a fundamental misunderstanding among people like you, because parliamentary democracy demands...
I know how the whip works.
Well, it's not just the whip, is it? Because Corbyn didn't ever really respect the whip. He voted against it all the time. And now if every MP did what he did, we'd be back to your 14-year-old days, Max, and we actually would have anarchy in this country. So the reason why we don't
now, don't we?
The reason why we don't have anarchy is precisely because of parliamentary democracy, and parliamentary democracy involves voting with your party, even when you might not want to, because that is the interplay of power. That is the nature of political compromise. Corbyn rejects that, which is fine, but you can only reject it as a rebel. You can't carry on rejecting it as a leader, because then you can't lead.
Well, yeah, this is it. I don't want to vote for Corbyn. He's not.
But no one else is fluttering their eyelashes at you. You're not getting any action from anywhere else either.
Eagle is uninspiring at best.
And we don't know enough about Owen Smith yet, except that he's Welsh.
And he's standing.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I like this. I mean, we're not going to have any fireworks like we did yesterday, are we? But we might actually get a little bit more insight into what is going on. And I've never really understood that. Is it Marshall McLuhan, the American author, who wrote "The medium is the message"? I never understood what that meant until yesterday, when I was wrestling with the Jeremy Corbyn conundrums and feeling a little bit bad about the young fellow who rang in to tell me that I got everything wrong. And I think it's probably fair to say regretted it subsequently. It's the medium is the message, and that's what the Corbynites reject. Because for people who perhaps are a little bit too immersed in the pragmatism of politics, that's what he meant. The medium is the message. So it doesn't matter what the message is. All that matters is the nature of the person delivering it. So look at American politics and look at the thing we've said to each other over the last couple of years, that when you're choosing someone in an election, the public will usually go with the person who looks most likely to be able to play that part in a film. Whether it's the American presidency or whether it's the British Prime Minister, they generally go. That's why things like eating a bacon sandwich were so relevant to that 2010 general election. And that seems to be the thing that Corbyn people reject. It doesn't mean they're wrong, it just means they're rejecting it. And I think from where I'm sitting, the medium is the message. And that's why this medium is not very good for that message. A question that popped into my head yesterday when we were discussing Jeremy Corbyn before he secured his place on the ballot in this leadership election. Now he has secured that place. I think the Labour Party's probably finished in its current form. I honestly don't see how it could survive unified with these two warring factions, one faction containing pretty much all of the MPs and the other faction containing pretty much all of the members. It's just never the twain shall meet. I hope I'm wrong. I've said to you a couple of times today, I've never before been so desperate to be wrong about so much. It's an astonishing position to find yourself in. I really hope I'm wrong about that. Really hope I'm wrong about the early indications that the referendum result might do us more harm than good. Because of course I do. I've got children. I live here. I want things to be better. Although now I just accept things being pretty much the same as they were before. When it comes to Corbyn's message, there's a lot to love. There really is. And I think a lot of the support holds the view, well, why won't it work? And as a 44-year-old man who reads the newspapers every day, I wonder whether I've got a bit of Stockholm syndrome. I read about how impossible it is to renationalise things. I read about how impossible it would be to bring in a form of quantitative easing designed to actually build infrastructure, housing, energy, transport. I wonder, well, of course it's ridiculous not to renew Trident. Why? That's the point, isn't it, that we've missed, those of us who really are baffled by Corbyn. We've missed that why. We've missed that really blithe presumption, delivered to us in part by the media, that all of these things are impossible dreams. What the people are saying to me, and they're not all young, they're saying, why? Why are they impossible dreams? If you can print money to give to banks, why can't you print money to build hospitals? If we don't renew Trident, we'll have real money, not lies on the side of a bus. We'll have real money to spend on other things. And you know what? While we're at it, if you're earning shed loads of money, why shouldn't you pay a little bit more tax to subsidise people on your own payroll who are earning buttons? Do you see what I mean? The problem, I guess, then becomes, well, why isn't he making these points as powerfully as they can be made? And we're back to the problem of the medium versus the message. So I'll ask you again. You tell me, as a Jeremy Corbyn fan, what success looks like now. 0345 6060 973. Hit the numbers now. You will get through, actually. Incredibly busy few weeks, but I promise you, whenever I say that there's gaps on the switchboard, there is. But you have to be quick. If you hit the numbers now, you will get through. What will success look like now for Jeremy Corbyn? Everybody pretty much agrees he's not going to be Prime Minister. He's pretty much unelectable. There's no way you get it past the country, rightly or wrongly. You just won't get him past the country. So what is success? What does success look like? Barry's in Lewisham. Barry, what would you like to say?
Yeah, morning, James.
Hello, mate.
It's a bit, James, I've considered you the last bastion of common sense on LBC, because what I've witnessed on LBC alone over the last few years is quite depressing. But this reaffirming that Jeremy Corbyn is unelectable and trying to keep him off the ballot, they tried to keep him off the NEC ballot. They've failed. Now they're trying to keep him off the general election ballot. That's going to fail. He is electable. Just because radio presenters and journalists, TV journalists, Laura Koonsberg and people like that keep reaffirming the negative to protect themselves.
That's not true. That's not. Listen. I promise you, we're not going to fall out. But I promise you, I work in this world, and the notion that these hang on, mate.
For a long, sorry.
These individual journalists are somehow doing the bidding of anybody else is just bogus. I promise you. And if the BBC's political no, because it won't be illustrative of the broader picture, will it?
Well, I mean, if you realise that half of this new Tory cabinet and half of David Cameron's cabinet went to school with the likes of Michael Crick, and half the journalists that are chasing them around Westminster, and Angela Eagle went to...
Do you know why, though, Barry? Well, why hasn't he come into my studio just to do a straight, civilised, face-to-face interview?
Who?
Jeremy Corbyn.
Because, unfortunately, LBC has been promoting...
No, Barry, I'm the voice... You just said I'm the voice of common sense.
You would allow...
So why won't he come in and talk to me?
Because, unfortunately, look what LBC's done over the last...
No, because he won't talk to anyone.
Boris, you've been a mouthpiece for the right-wingers for the last...
Nick Clegg.
Clegg had a programme on LBC that wasn't even stopped during the election.
And he's a right-winger. It was stopped during the election.
It wasn't stopped during the election.
Yeah, the programme only started after he became Deputy Prime Minister.
Yes, and in the lead up to the last election, it continued right up until...
It didn't. I mean, it doesn't... Whether it did or it didn't is immaterial to the conversation we're having, because Clegg isn't a right-winger, but it didn't, because that would have breached Ofcom rules. Here's the deal. The reason why he gets the media coverage he gets... is because of how he behaves. It's not because of journalists with axes to grind. I would love to interview him. I can't. Therefore, I conclude he's got something to hide. Tell me why I shouldn't conclude that.
Well, you've spent, like, the last 20 minutes saying he's unelectable. Who told you that?
The country.
Well, where in the country? I've only seen one person in this country with the level of support. I don't see bands of people following Angela Eagle around.
No,
I don't see bands of people following you around. I don't see bands of people following David Cameron around. Look at the support that he's got. It's a lie that you are helping to perpetuate with the style of your programme today.
Okay.
And it's something that LBC's been doing for quite some time now. But that's your right. But we see through it.
Okay, mate.
And that's why you don't get it. That's why the PLP at Labour Party don't get it. I will stand against Heidi Alexandra myself.
You're supposed to be telling me what success looks like. So you're telling me success looks like winning the general election.
A real PLP to support Jeremy Corbyn to change this country for the better. To get it, I remember when we had an inner London education authority and people could do night classes and better themselves, and kids weren't roaming the streets. They had youth clubs and things to do in the evenings, not running around with knives.
Yes. So how is Jeremy Corbyn going to deliver any of that, do you think?
Well, tell me who else has got a band of people following him around. Tell me who else has got...
Okay, I will, Barry.
Who, Michael Jackson?
Well, he's dead, mate, but you could have Harry Styles or Justin Bieber if you wanted.
Well,
or Nigel Farage. You could have Nigel Farage.
Well, I'm not talking. Well, the BNP was quite popular. The National Front.
This is your question. Was who else has got a band of people following them around? And now you're saying, well, the fascists do.
I'm talking about positive people who don't look.
No, you're talking about people you like versus people you don't like. But guess what? The people following the fascists around don't like you.
Of course, they don't like me because I'm black.
That proves my point, Barry. You're not. This is what's so frustrating, my friend. Is that I've got no idea what point you think you're making. Jeremy Corbyn is wonderful, I promise, is what I'm hearing, and I can live with that. That's fine.
No, Jeremy Corbyn is electable. Tell me an election that he's lost. Tell me one election that he's been in that he's lost.
Well, in terms of winning a general election, I can't, because he's never fought one. He's never fought one.
Look back on his voting record. Tell me one time where he's been wrong. He's been ahead of the curve.
Oh, for heaven's sake, mate. This is just cultism. You think he's right about everything? Has he ever been wrong about anything?
No, I think.
No, I want you to answer that question. Has he ever been wrong about anything?
Yeah, he's been wrong about a few things.
What?
He was wrong about taking seriously the accusations about anti-Semitism that were just the media inventions to discredit him.
Okay. No, that's fine. I'm glad you had a fair crack of the whip. So you've got that side of it, which you will never break through to. The whole world is conspiring against Barry, okay? And Jeremy Corbyn is the only person with lots of people following around, apart from all those fascists over there who we'll just have to ignore, because otherwise the answer to his question doesn't suit his own agenda. But everybody else who thinks there's something going on here that is wonderful and beautiful, and they're motivated by hope and positivity rather than hate and negativity, what does success look like? Charles is in Peckham. Charles, what do you reckon?
Well, I'm stunned by Barry's saying that everyone's against him because he's black, or doesn't like him because he's black. That just got me. Jeremy Corbyn, I think, would be better placed in the church. I could see him with a dog collar around his neck.
Is that a compliment or a criticism?
Well, it's just an observation. I wouldn't say either way. Just that he doesn't come across to me. One of the things, I was in instrument making many years ago during the time of the Falklands, and I would, that's not why I support Trident. I think we need a nuclear deterrent. And for a man to say that he'll put the submarines out and they haven't got the right weapons in, it's absolutely crazy. I mean, that really is just completely and utterly stupid.
Why? Why do we need a nuclear deterrent?
Well, because so many places in the world, like the Koreans, it's just a growing place. We do need it,
Well, that's not an answer to my question. North Korea is run by a madman. The idea that he is going to not launch a nuclear weapon at someone because they've got nuclear weapons, it's going to fly over all these countries that have got nuclear weapons and land on us because we haven't got one. You're not really arguing that, are you?
No, I'm not arguing that at all.
So why do we need a nuclear deterrent? Why is it such a given? Because I think this is where we've all gone wrong, is that we're all just mocking and sneering at these people who are saying maybe things could be different. Why do we need a nuclear deterrent?
No, maybe they do, but I wouldn't say, if it was escalating on that scale, there would be other things going on. There'd be political brinkmanship going on. There'd be all other things going on.
Why do we need a nuclear deterrent? I think this is the trick to unlocking the Corbyn appeal. You have to start from the very beginning. So you tell me why is it such a given? Why is it such an absolute unchallenged position?
James, it's just an opinion that I would prefer we had one than we didn't have.
And I'm asking you to explain your opinion. Why? Why do we need one?
Well, I thought I had.
Well, you told me that you're worried North Korea might try to blow us up. Is that it?
No, I'm not worried about just North Korea. It's just a point at which he comes out with. It would be great. If more idealistic things happen that were good. It would be great. But I do see him as a certain type. I thought for a long time. I've thought about him for a long time, like you have. And he reminds me of someone I know quite closely who's got not Alzheimer's, that condition where. We're covering too much ground. I can't keep up. Have you explained to me why you want and we need a nuclear deterrent yet? That's a pure opinion. I can't. I mean,
because that to me is really helpful, because these are the things we haven't been doing. People like me have just been sitting here going, "Oh, it's ridiculous. Of course you need a nuclear deterrent. Jeremy Corbyn lives on cloud cuckoo land." We didn't used to operate like that. I just know, mate, you've had your chance. I've asked you 17 times why we need a nuclear deterrent, and all you've got is Kim Jong-un. Maybe he's got more points than people realise. At which point my problem becomes, why isn't he making these points better? and you say it was all your fault in the media for not letting him. I said, well, here's the door. Open it, come in, sit down, make these cases. But he doesn't. He hides. And he speaks to rooms full of people who already agree with him. And then fellas like Barry ring up and think that's a sign of popularity. It would be like me only taking calls from people who agree with me and then saying that proves I'm right about everything. It's 11:45. It's progress being made in my desperate 9-month-long attempts to understand better the appeal of Jeremy Corbyn. And so we're back to the message again. The message, and there are some things that I would like to see properly examined, like the suggestion that we don't need a nuclear deterrent, like the suggestion that we can nationalise the railways, like the suggestion that instead of printing money to give to banks to cover their loan book, we could print money to give to builders to build hospitals and houses. These are really interesting ideas. So why doesn't he bring them into a studio like this and explain them, expose them to proper scrutiny? Otherwise you're left with the idea that he just delivers the same lines again and again and again to the same cheers again and again and again from the same people again and again and again. Which is why I keep asking what success looks like, because at the moment success looks like an echo chamber of approval that creates almost a siege mentality that we've seen in British politics at the other end, on the other side now over the last few years. And well, let's just say it doesn't exactly promote harmony, does it? 10 to 12 is the time. Theo Usherwood is at Downing Street for the final moments of David Cameron's premiership. What's going on, Theo?
It is, James, a global media event. We have TV crews from Japan, from Poland, from Germany. All of the American networks are here. It's a little bit like a walking advert for TV, for dental whitening. And we're all waiting, of course, for David Cameron to come back after PMQs to make that statement on the steps of Downing Street before going over to Buckingham Palace to tender his resignation with the Queen, and then Theresa May's statement, which will follow her visit to see the Queen for a cup of tea and for permission to form a government. And it will be interesting. And the reason I pick up on the fact that this is a global media event, and especially a European media event, is because all eyes are on our new Prime Minister and what she'll say in terms of our negotiation triggering Article 50. What words will she say, if any, this afternoon about Britain's place in Europe and in the world, indeed?
What do we think PMQs will be like? Do we have any early indications of I mean, is there going to be an outbreak of love and kisses between Cameron and Corbyn, or will there be some sniping? Just take a punt. We'll probably get it wrong, whatever we predict, but let's have a go anyway.
I think there will be the usual sniping with the third or fourth question from Jeremy Corbyn to David Cameron after an initial "we wish you well with your future career." But I'm personally more interested to see what underarm throws the Tory backbenchers throw Mr. Cameron and what subjects they pick out. Because
and this will be arranged in advance.
Yes, whips questions arranged in advance. Subjects, please can you emails going around, please can you ask the Prime Minister about this? Because those, of course, will tie in with what David Cameron wants to be remembered by. What does he want his legacy to be? What does he want his parting comments, his parting shots to be? I'm sure we'll hear there'll be a question on equal marriage. Mr. Cameron has picked that one out repeatedly in the last couple of weeks as something that he is immensely proud of during his time in government. I'm sure there'll be something on free schools, on education. Of course, David Cameron wasn't able to make it compulsory that all schools would be academies. That was blocked by his own backbenchers, but he announced yesterday 31 new free schools for the country, and it'll be interesting to see what he has to say about education reform as well. And of course, the economy. He always claimed that these years of austerity were going to be worth it because we were going to reduce our deficit, and then of course what we've seen in the unsteadiness that we've seen in the economy as a result of Brexit. And I imagine longer term, looking ahead, that's actually how David Cameron's legacy will come to be defined. What is the outcome of this? What is the outcome of Britain's place in the European Union? Will we actually leave, or will we see a soft Brexit that's been talked about by some Remainers?
And that could be decades before we get a conclusive answer.
Could be decades. Philip Hammond, James has said the renegotiation on Article 50 could take 6 years.
Do you think we should take PMQ? Well, it does, and that's just the renegotiation before the impact of whatever we end up with at the end of the renegotiation begins to be felt. Should we take PMQs live, Theo? You can decide today.
I think we should.
Yeah?
I think we should take it live. I think it's going to be a momentous occasion, whatever.
I agree with you. We'll take the whole thing. But I just wanted you to have the casting vote, because I sometimes feel you're out there doing all the heavy lifting while I just sit here shooting my mouth off every day.
That's very kind of you, Jim.
Well, it's very kind of you to continue doing the heavy lifting while I continue shooting my mouth off every day. I'll see you when you get back to the office. Theo Usherwood there, live at Downing Street. We'll hear more from him probably before the end of this programme, and if not, you will before the end of play today on LBC. So, making progress, I think. The appeal of Jeremy Corbyn is not personal. It is political. It's the message. It's challenging these presumptions. I feel almost guilty now for not recognising this sooner. But I thought everyone was being cultish about him. That's why the parallels with Farage seem to me to work. All these people who don't really know what it's about, but they know that he somehow represents the answer to all their problems. Let's park him for a minute. Focus on these questions, like why should the wage gap be growing at such a ridiculous rate? Surely there's something that a government can do to stop that. Now, the reason why perhaps members of the Parliamentary Labour Party haven't been making these points themselves is because they know how the world works. They know what happens to a left-wing politician who dares to put his head above the parapet. He ends up having his dead father maligned in the Daily Mail as a traitor to this country. He ends up having his... all sorts of things happen. You don't need me to remind you. And so that's why they don't do it. Corbyn somehow, by dint of his eccentricities and his long history of protest, almost gets a free pass on that. It's almost as if they don't need to malign him because he fits the stereotypes of negativity so much anyway. So why won't he make more effort selling the messages? Why won't he actually deliver the real expertise? So he hired Danny Blanchflower from the Bank of England to advise on economics, and then Danny Blanchflower resigned because Jeremy Corbyn's not providing any leadership. So I would cautiously suggest, with a couple of slightly mad exceptions, obviously, cautiously suggest it's the message that appeals to people, not the person. How do you get the message onto a manifesto with a person who can win an election? Joe's in Bristol. Joe, what do you reckon?
Yeah, hello James. Thanks for having me on again. I think answering your question about what does success look like, I think we're on the way to success. I think in terms of the correction that we need, we're discussing the issues. I think it is about the issues rather than about Jeremy Corbyn. And I think the reason I think that this is success is because actually I was thinking about it yesterday. I was thinking, blimey, what are we going to do if they get rid of Corbyn? It's all going to be over. But actually it wouldn't be, because essentially he's the kingmaker, really. I mean, the Momentum, I'm actually a member of Momentum. I don't recognise any of the stuff that I see about throwing bricks through windows.
There's no evidence to suggest that was part of that was done by a member of Momentum. But we know that the workers at Portland Communications, the victim of the last weird conspiracy theory, have received death threats, and we know that people have reported horrible toxic militant tendency style atmospheres at constituency Labour parties. But I wonder if that's becoming a distraction as well. If he's the kingmaker, who's he going to make?
Well, I mean, I don't know whether it would be John McDonnell or maybe there's somebody else that hasn't been.
What do you think the plan is? That's the problem, I guess.
Well, I don't recognise either the idea that he's trying to start a socialist revolution. I don't get that, because if you listen to a lot of his early interviews when he won the leadership, he was reaching out to the Parliamentary Labour Party and welcoming dissenting voices, saying, listen, I accept that I'm going to have to move on some of my issues. I accept that we're going to have to come to compromises on certain things. Yes,
but I think they were expecting flesh to start appearing on bones as a result of that consultative process, and it never really did. It's a constant round of protest and lip service, isn't it? That's why I mean, what's the actual plan?
Yeah, well, I think that is a good question. In terms of, I've looked at
it's a bit of a worry, isn't it?
Policies, and they're not. The manifesto that was put in place by Ed Miliband is still where the policies reside. If you call Labour Party HQ, I mean, you're told, the policies are in the manifesto, and we know that we're probably going to...
And that's not the party he's leading, or rather, he's not the leader of that party. He's the leader of something else. I'm keeping an eye on the clock. Don't take it personally, because PMQs, David Cameron's final PMQs, is about to start. The chamber is understandably and predictably rammed, and it is poised to begin at any moment. So I may well swerve over there with barely any warning at all. So I guess we're left, Joe, with the conclusion that you think we're moving in the right direction, but you're not quite sure who's going to take over behind the wheel to ensure that we do actually get there, wherever it is we're going. Eleanor's in Manchester. Eleanor, help me out here. What would you like to say?
Hi, I'm a little bit nervous because this is the first time that I've ever been on the radio.
It's only me.
But the thing that I wanted to phone up and say was, we're going to get the leaders and the politicians that we deserve, and the kind of characteristics that you're saying make Jeremy Corbyn unelectable, if that's the kind of characteristics that we want in our politicians, like being slick, having expensive suits, being able to...
No, but I never used those words. I know. Let me use some other ones, okay? Compelling, persuasive, evidence-based, accessible, open to scrutiny. And then I'll add some others that are a little bit more Stardust-flavoured. Charisma, personality, warmth, a winning nature. These things, you don't have to say expensive suits and slickness.
Well, all of the first ones that you said, I do think that Jeremy Corbyn has those things, and his team. I do think John McDonnell's absolutely amazing. He's totally evidence-based. His panel of economists that he's got,
they've resigned
informing
now.
Not his board of...
The main one, Danny Blanchflower, resigned in protest. I've got to go to the House of Commons. We'll talk later, I promise.